Hey friends, I'm back with another mental health video. My name is Mark, I'm a mental health therapist, and today we are going to be extending our conversation that we started in the last video about communication and focusing more in depth on managing conflict. Before we get started, I just want to note that all of the things I talk about in this video will be most relevant with your close relationships, like your spouse or partner, your kids, parents, siblings, anybody that you have close emotional connections to. But what I talk about can also be used sometimes with coworkers, bosses, staff, and other people in your life who are not as close. So when I say conflict, what I'm talking about is anytime we have an argument, a fight, a disagreement, or otherwise a difference of opinion with somebody that results in us sort of like butting heads like this, where we can't seem to agree and maybe things escalate and we yell, things like that, all right? And the reason I use the term managing conflict is because sometimes if there's a problem or a disagreement, we are not ever going to agree about it. And when that keeps coming up over and over and over again, there are ways that we can communicate better through those types of circumstances instead of it always resulting in a big argument. First, there are some general tips that I can give you in order to reduce conflict or to manage it better. The first, if you refer back to the last video on communication that I did, is to listen more and speak less, right? And the best way to do that is to stop thinking about what you're going to say next in this disagreement when the other person is talking. Listen to them. Seek to understand them. The second point related to that is to decrease your defensiveness by asking questions instead of fighting back, right? If you don't understand the point a person is making, or you don't understand why they think about something the way they do, then ask them questions about it. Get clarification. Try to understand better. When we understand each other better, then there's less chance that when we disagree, it's going to get into a fight and we're going to yell, and then things end badly when that happens. Step 3 is to get rid of the idea of right and wrong. When we're talking about managing conflict better, when we think about the other person is wrong and we're right, then all we're going to do is try to fight for our position. Instead, we want to think that there are just two different perspectives on this issue. And our job is to really understand the other person's perspective. Their job is to really understand ours. Step 4 is to validate. Basically, what that means is that when somebody gives their opinion, their thoughts, their feelings, and you have fully understood why they think or feel that way, then you tell them that it makes sense. You say, I understand why you think this way considering what you've told me. I truly understand how you came to this conclusion or why it is you're feeling the way you do based on the way you think and what you experienced. We're not saying who's right and who's wrong, just I understand. And then finally, the last general tip that I can give you is to focus on the problem, not the other person. Basically what that means, instead of thinking that the other person is the one who has to change, think of the problem as something you work together on to make better. That means both of you have opportunity to do things differently to make the problem better, rather than thinking, I don't have to change, that person has to change. That way, we're not fighting each other like enemies anymore, or like, people who are in conflict. Instead, we're thinking of this problem as something outside of the other person and outside of ourselves. So to get a little more in depth as to why conflict can get out of hand and to escalate, I'm going to be talking a bit about the research of Drs. John and Julie Gottman from the Gottman Institute. I'm going to put their website up here for you to reference if you want to learn more about what I'm talking about. But basically, I'm going to go in depth into 4 communication patterns that makes conflict get worse, as well as how we counter those communication patterns. I'll put them all up for you here to start. The communication patterns are defensiveness, which we counter with taking responsibility, criticism, which we counter with gentle startup, contempt, which we counter with creating a culture of appreciation, and stonewalling, which we counter with physiological self-soothing. Defensiveness occurs when we feel like we're being attacked, whether or not the other person actually is attacking us, and usually results in us being like, well, I might have done this, but you did that. We try to shift blame onto the other person instead of taking responsibility for our part in this problem. The counter to defensiveness is, as I said, taking responsibility. So that's even saying whatever small part you may have played into making this problem worse. For example, well, I know we're always late, and I take responsibility in that because I don't warn you ahead of time when we have to go somewhere, right? So even if that other person plays a role in making that problem happen, taking responsibility allows us to decrease our own defensiveness as well as decrease defensiveness in the other person who maybe also feels like they're being attacked. Criticism occurs when we attack the person's character or personality instead of focusing on a behavior that we didn't like. For example, we say, "You're lazy," instead of, "I asked you to clean your room up 3 times and you haven't done that." The gentle startup is the antidote, the counter to criticism, by allowing us to focus on a problem rather than attacking the character of the other person. Now, the rules to use the gentle startup are as follows. 1, start with something that's going well. So when you want to talk about a problem with somebody, start with something you appreciate about them or something you like about what's going on between the two of you. And that helps ease into the conversation. Step 2 is to talk about how you feel when this behavior happens or doesn't happen, using an emotion word of some kind, like, "I feel frustrated when I have to ask you so many times to clean your room," right? Again, it's focused on a behavior rather than a part of that person's character. And you're also talking about how it affects you, right? So step 1, start with something that's going well. Step 2, I feel blank. Step 3, when, then you describe the situation as you see it. Again, you're not describing the other person, you're just describing the actual behavior. I feel frustrated, that's step 2, when I have to ask you so many times to clean your room, step 3. Step 4 is to state what you want to be different. I would appreciate if I only have to ask you once and you do it, clean up your room right away. And then step 5 is asking for feedback. What do you think about that? When you're asking for feedback, the important part is to actually be open to receiving feedback. If that other person says, "Well, I can't do it the way that you want," then you let them explain. And then you go back and forth until you come up with a solution for what the behavior is. That way the two of you have worked together on it. Contempt occurs when we feel a sense of superiority over that other person, especially in close relationships like with our spouse or partners and our kids. When we feel contempt towards them, this feeling causes a lot of problems in relationships. This one type of pattern can end many marriages and destroy relationships between you and other people. So contempt is a lot of how we feel towards another person, such as, oh, well, I'm better than them, I'm smarter than them, I'm more responsible than them, and then we treat them like that. You can always tell when somebody feels contempt towards you because, when they start talking, maybe they roll their eyes like this. Or when somebody starts talking to you, you're just like, ugh, right? Or you kind of sneer, like, right? Like you have this intense feeling of superiority to that other person. To counter contempt, we have to create a culture of appreciation. So by doing that, we decrease our contemptuous feelings and feelings of superiority to other people. And we do that by telling them things that we care about them for, things that we love about them, things we appreciate about them. You have to say these things out loud. It could be anything like, oh, I really enjoy the way you look today. You really picked out your clothes really well. Or, this dinner was amazing. Thank you so much for, cooking this for me. It can be anything. Just whenever you think something good about that other person, you say it to them. And the more you do this, the less we get that feeling of being better than them, or more important than them. The final one of these communication patterns that caused problems is stonewalling. Stonewalling occurs when you basically stop listening to that other person, and often happens when we get really emotionally overwhelmed by the conflict that's happening. So you can tell when somebody's stonewalling, or you can tell when you're stonewalling, when they're talking to you and you just have no facial expressions. You're not registering anything they're saying to you. You couldn't repeat back what they said because you just simply didn't listen to it. You don't look at them. Maybe you're busy on your phone or you're paying attention to something else. But it's basically like you're talking to a stone wall, or that other person is talking to a stone wall. The counter to this is to take a time out and soothe yourself. Since stonewalling occurs when we're very emotionally overwhelmed, it's important to take a break. So you say to your partner or the other person you're in conflict with, I can't talk about this right now. I need to take a break. Can we come back in an hour and then we can finish having this conversation? It's important to set a time, and I recommend taking a full hour because that's how long it will take for our bodies to come down from that emotional overwhelm, that fight or flight response, okay? So when you take this break, it's important to do things that you find relaxing and calms you. You don't want to keep thinking about all of the things you want to tell that other person, because that doesn't get you out of that emotionally overwhelmed state. So when you're taking a break, you want to do things like have a hot cup of tea, or go for a walk, or play with one of your pets or another animal, read a book. Do things that help calm all of your senses down. And then after an hour, you can come back and you'll be in a better state of mind in order to talk to that other person and find ways to resolve or manage your conflict with them. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for sitting through this much longer video than the ones I've been doing in the past. Conflict is a pretty heavy topic, but it's one that we all could use some help with much of the time. So again, thank you for sitting and watching my video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.